Louise Masset, a 33-year-old woman of mixed French and English heritage, was known for her cultured demeanor. In 1896, she gave birth to an illegitimate son named Manfred, which compelled her to leave France due to the societal stigma associated with such births at the time. She settled in London, specifically at 29 Bethune Road, Stoke Newington. Despite her circumstances, Louise didn't seem particularly maternal, as she soon placed Manfred in foster care with Mrs. Helen Gentle of Tottenham. Mrs. Gentle cared for Manfred from infancy, receiving a monthly payment of 37 shillings, which was allegedly provided by the child's biological father in France. This arrangement allowed Louise to work as a day governess for a wealthy family and also teach piano, a popular form of entertainment before the advent of cinema, radio, and television. In 1899, Louise began a romantic relationship with a 19-year-old French bank clerk named Eudore Lucas, who lived next door. Eudore was in Britain for finance training, earning about £3 a week, a sum that both Louise and Eudore believed made marriage unfeasible. Eudore was aware of Manfred's existence, but his feelings towards the child remained unclear. On October 16, 1899, Louise informed Mrs. Gentle in a letter that Manfred's father planned to take the boy to live with him in France, with Louise intending to collect him on October 27th. However, Louise had also made plans for a getaway to Brighton with Eudore, for what could be termed as a dirty weekend, booking 2 adjoining rooms in a cheap hotel. On Friday, Louise discreetly placed a clinker brick from her garden into her Gladstone bag before meeting Helen Gentle in Stamford Hill. Amid tearful farewells, she departed with Manfred, carrying a parcel of his clothes prepared by Mrs. Gentle for the journey to France, and boarded a bus to London Bridge railway station. Manfred, dressed in a blue frock and a sailor's hat, accompanied his mother. Such attire was customary for young boys at the time. At 1:45 p.m. on Friday, they were observed in the first-class waiting room at London Bridge Station. Around 3 p.m., the attendant, Mrs. Ellen Rees, noticed Manfred appearing distressed and suggested he might be hungry. Louise hastily left, mentioning she would buy Manfred a cake. She returned alone approximately 3 hours later, preparing to catch the train to Brighton for her rendezvous with Eudore on Saturday. At Dalston Junction Station, a woman was shocked to discover the body of a child in the ladies' toilets around 6:20 p.m. The boy, naked except for a black shawl, had suffered severe head injuries, seemingly inflicted by pieces of a broken clinker brick found nearby, similar to those found in Louise's garden. Dr. J.P. Fennell, upon examining the body, speculated that Manfred had been beaten unconscious and then suffocated, possibly with a hand over his mouth and nose. Louise frequented this station on her way to one of her piano pupils. The newspapers on Saturday were abuzz with the news of Manfred's discovery, a sensational topic in Victorian times. Louise had sent Helen Gentle a letter received on Monday the 30th, claiming Manfred missed her and had been seasick during the ferry crossing but was now fine. Helen, however, became suspicious, having learned of a child's body found matching Manfred's description. She alerted the police, who later identified the body as Manfred, and retrieved his belongings from the left luggage office at Brighton Station. In Stoke Newington, the black shawl found with Manfred was traced back to a shop, where it was sold to Louise on October 24th. Witnesses at London Bridge Station also recalled seeing Louise with the child earlier in the day. Louise, distressed after learning about Manfred's discovery, allegedly implicated Eudore in the crime during a visit to her sister. She was subsequently arrested at her other sister's residence, identified in an identity parade by Mrs. Rees, and charged with murder. She was committed for trial at the Old Bailey in December of 1899. Louise stood trial at the Old Bailey before Mr. Justice Bruce from December 13th to December 18th, 1899. Her defense, led by Lord Coleridge, asserted that Louise had arranged for 2 women named Browning to care for Manfred for an annual fee of £18. According to Louise, she had paid them a 12-pound deposit before handing over Manfred, but the Browning women could not be located, and no receipt for the deposit could be produced. This defense, while it may seem implausible now, carried weight at the time when cases of baby farming murders were not uncommon. However, lacking tangible evidence, and with the Browning women missing, the jury rejected Louise's story. The weight of the evidence against her was deemed conclusive, resulting in an inevitable guilty verdict. Upon hearing the verdict, Louise collapsed in the dock and had to be revived to receive her sentence, death by hanging. She was escorted from the court to the adjacent Newgate prison, where she was placed in the condemned cells. There, she spent Christmas and New Year's of 1900 under constant surveillance by a pair of female wardens. In the condemned cells, Louise reportedly confessed to the murder. A petition, organized by French women working in London, was sent to Queen Victoria, but it was disregarded. On the morning of January 9, 1900, at 9 a.m., Louise faced her executioner, James Billington, from Bolton. Adhering to the customs of the time, she wore a long dress and was accompanied by the chaplain, 2 male wardens, and the assistant executioner. Billington secured a body belt around her waist, binding her wrists, before leading her to the execution shed and onto the trap of the large gallows at Newgate, capable of accommodating 3 prisoners at once. Her legs were secured with a leather strap outside her skirt, and a noose was placed around her neck. With everything set, Billington covered her head with a white hood and pulled the lever, sending her into eternity, as was the expression at the time. After hanging for the prescribed hour, her body was taken down and buried in an unmarked grave within the prison grounds. Maria Barbella was born in Italy, and her family immigrated to Mulberry Bend, New York in 1892. After nearly a year in the United States, she met Domenico Cataldo, who hailed from the same region in Italy. Working in a factory, she passed Cataldo's shoeshine booth every day. Despite her father Michael's overprotectiveness, Barbella spent much time with Cataldo, keeping their meeting secret. When Michael discovered their relationship, he forbade her from seeing Cataldo again. However, Cataldo persisted, and eventually Barbella agreed to see him. One day, Cataldo took her to a boarding house where he allegedly drugged and assaulted her. He promised to marry her, showing her a savings book with a $400 deposit. Despite this, he continually postponed the marriage, revealing that he was already married with children in Italy. Barbella, deeply influenced by the traditional code of honor from southern Italy, feared bringing shame to her family within the Italian-American community if she remained unwed. Devastated by Cataldo's decision to end their relationship and return to Italy, Barbella confided in her mother. When her mother confronted Cataldo, he agreed to marry Barbella only if they paid him $200. On April 16, 1895, in a saloon on East 13th Street in New York City, Cataldo, planning to leave for Italy that afternoon, played cards. Barbella entered the bar, and after a brief exchange, Cataldo insulted her, saying, "Only a pig can marry you." In response, Barbella produced a straight razor and swiftly slashed his neck, causing him to stagger out of the bar, clutching his throat. He collapsed and died in the gutter on Avenue A. Barbella was arrested and confined in the New York Halls of Justice and House of Detention, commonly referred to as the Tombs, for a period of 2.5 months. Represented by appointed attorneys Amos Evans and Henry Segwig, her trial commenced on July 11th. The case sparked controversy among Italians who believed the verdict to be unjust, as there were no Italians on the jury. At the time of the trial, Barbella was unable to speak or comprehend English. She confessed to the crime, detailing how she slit his throat and how he pursued her before collapsing and dying. Although the jury showed sympathy towards her circumstances, Recorder Goff maintained that the verdict was in accordance with the facts, and no other verdict could, in view of the evidence, have been considered. Despite the jury's sentiments, Barbella was found guilty and sentenced to death by electric chair on August 19, 1895. She became the second woman to be condemned to execution by electric chair, following the commuted conviction of serial killer Lizzie Halliday in 1894. Numerous complaints were directed toward Governor Levi Morton regarding the handling of the case, yet it appeared that little could be changed. However, Barbella was granted an appeal due to the judge's jury's instructions, which heavily favored conviction. On November 16, 1896, she faced a second trial. This time, her counsel presented a significantly more sympathetic argument, portraying her as a victim of rape whose traumatic experience worsened her pre-existing epilepsy. It was alleged that she suffered a seizure and lost control of her faculties. Ultimately, she was acquitted of the charges. Following her release from prison, Barbella once again captured headlines for her heroic act of rescuing a neighbor who had accidentally caught fire. Acting swiftly, she used a blanket to smother the flames with her own hands. On November 4, 1897, Barbella married Francesco Paolo Bruno, an Italian immigrant. Their union brought forth a son named Frederick in 1899. By 1902, she was residing with her parents and husband. In the 1940 census records, she appeared as Mary D. Chiara, living with her second husband, Ernesto, on Pike Street in Manhattan. Mary, formerly known as Barbella, passed away on March 24, 1950. She was laid to rest in the Old Calvary Cemetery under the name Mary D. Chiara. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to join our community. We upload every Monday and Thursday at 4 p.m. For more content like this, be sure to check out our other videos on the channel. You can also follow us on our other social media platforms for uploads and updates. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.